Have you ever experienced the sensation of falling from a great height? It's a frightening feeling, right? But what if I asked you to experience this from a height above 400 feet in a dark, mysterious cave? Wouldn't that be the most horrifying experience of your life? Today, we're about to share the story of two cave divers who faced that fate, leading them into darkness. One story tells of a tragedy that happened in an incredibly deep cave system, while the other highlights a brave cave diver who risked his life to face the unknown. What motivates these cave divers to venture into such extreme environments? Do they dive to discover lost treasure like we often see in movies? Let's uncover their true motivations and the stories behind their adventures. Our story begins with Marson K, who was just 29 years old, a man with two great loves. By day, he worked as a network engineer at Life South Community Blood Center in Gainesville, Florida. For 6 years, he made sure that the center's computer systems ran smoothly, helping save lives. But when the workday ended, he dove into the water. For Marson, each dive was a welcome escape. But little did he know that this particular dive at Weeki Wachee Cave would change everything. Florida is known for its beautiful landscapes, where sunny beaches and green wetlands come together. The Everglades, a famous national park, is home to many different animals and plants. With its warm weather, Florida attracts millions of visitors each year who love activities like boating, fishing, and hiking. Caves add a special touch to Florida's nature. Weeki Wachee Cave is one of these gems, with clear waters and amazing rock formations. It is a lovely place for anyone who enjoys nature, showing off the wonderful natural beauty of Florida. It was first discovered in the 1940s when a group of local divers explored the area. The cave became famous in 1947 when the Weeki Wachee Springs attraction opened, showcasing underwater mermaid shows that draw visitors in from far and wide. The crystal clear waters of the cave make it the perfect setting for these performances. Over the years, the site has seen changes in ownership and has gone through various renovations, but it has always remained a beloved spot for both locals and tourists. Marson's was inspired by his father's Coast Guard service. This inspiration drove him to join KST Underwater Research, a nonprofit that explores thrilling underwater caves. At KST, Marson thrived on adventure, diving into the depths where few dared to go. Each expedition was a chance to uncover hidden wonders and collect important data for science. The exploration at the Weeki Wachee Cave system started off in the late 1990s. But strong water pressure at the entrance made it a challenge for even the most skilled divers. Everything changed in 2007, though, when a drought dramatically lowered water levels, revealing a gateway to adventure. Being a part of the team on March 31, 2012, Marson felt a rush of excitement as he joined a 5-person dive crew to explore Weeki Wachee. This group had spent weeks getting ready for this adventurous dive into one of the deepest freshwater caves in the United States. They put together a 25-member team, including 7 safety divers, to make sure that everything went smoothly. Marson's heart raced as they prepared to dive into the mysterious underwater world, knowing that working together was the key to a successful adventure. Marson entered the water at 3:30 p.m. He was equipped with a full scuba tank and perfectly functioning regulators, and he felt ready for the exploration ahead. The cave's entrance was tight and narrow, small enough to allow only one diver to pass at a time. He navigated through the constricted passage, effortlessly swimming past the high-pressure water flow. Once Marson reached inside, he descended to 180 feet, entering a large chamber. The atmosphere was both frightening and breathtaking, with tight spaces and jagged rocks creating a beautiful passageway. Previous teams had thoughtfully strung a white rope along the narrow passages, providing a clear path back to the surface. He kept his focus on the rope, confident that it would guide him along safely. After exploring around the cave, Marson signaled that he was ready to go up. His team gave him the go-ahead, and he started his ascent, following the white rope. Each pull brought him closer to the light above. When he finally surfaced, he told the team about the passages around the cave. Marson dived down again for round 2, but this time, the light from the surface began to fade, and a wave of fear hit him. The water around him felt empty, with very few signs of life. Normally, in freshwater areas like this, he would see many fish, but this unexplored part felt lifeless. The quietness made him uneasy. He began to go further down into the stillness, reminding him just how far he was away from the familiar world above. He had to push through his fear, focusing on his goal and trusting his training as he continued downward. After checking the surrounding area, he decided to go back up again, but that's when things took a different turn. His rapid rise caused a dangerous condition known as arterial gas embolism. This happens when a diver surfaces too quickly, allowing gas bubbles to form in the bloodstream. These bubbles can travel to the heart, brain, or other vital organs, causing serious injury or even death. Suddenly, Marson felt a sharp pain, and he knew that he was in trouble. Confusion filled his mind, making it hard to think clearly. Instead of following the rope as planned, he drifted off course into a tighter, more dangerous part of the cave, just 100 feet from the surface. The walls seemed to close in around him, and panic took hold as he realized how serious his situation was. The dim light up above faded, making him feel even more alone. Fighting against the pain, he struggled to focus, knowing that he had to find the rope and get back to safety. Marson found himself trapped in a narrow space, and the weight of panic pressing down on him. As confusion swirled in his mind, he struggled to understand what was happening. Every frantic movement only heightened his disorientation, and the situation was escalating rapidly. He fought against the urge to panic, knowing that losing control could mean disaster. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cave, the rest of the team finished searching the area and began to swim upward, completely unaware of the danger Marson faced. Deep down in the narrow passage, Marson felt the crushing isolation of his predicament. With every passing moment, his sense of urgency grew. Marson took a deep breath and he tried to remember where the rope was. When the other divers reached the surface after their search, they sensed that something was wrong. They quickly gathered together, exchanging worried glances. The safety divers had already surfaced and were anxiously discussing the situation. It became clear that Marson hadn't returned with them. Each diver understood the urgency of acting fast, as time was now critical. They pinpointed Marson's last known location and they prepared to dive back down. Their diving skills were now being tested as they focused on bringing their teammate back to safety. Once they reached the spot, the team sensed that Marson might be stuck in the narrow passages. They tried to pull him free from the crevice, but they couldn't reach him. The team also used light signals, but these failed to awaken Marson. Realizing that they couldn't help him on their own, the safety team resurfaced to call for rescue divers. Right after the team told the rescue authorities, they quickly descended again into the depths of Wekiwachi Cave. The rescue team knew that the cave passages were difficult to navigate. After a challenging journey, they finally reached Marson. When they arrived, they found him unconscious, his regulator dislodged, and his mask pushed up. Despite their efforts, there were no signs of life. Marson's heart had stopped due to the embolism. Getting him out of the tight space was a big challenge. The narrow passage made it hard for the divers to move, and Marson's gear only made things more difficult. The rescuers knew that they had to cut through Marson's gear to free him. Working carefully in the tight space, they felt the pressure of their mission. The struggle to move in the narrow passage added to their stress, making every second feel even more important. The rescue team finally brought Marson's body back to the surface at around 4:47 p.m. His anxious teammates stood by, facing the harsh reality of losing one of their own. A careful check showed that Marson's tanks still had plenty of air, and all of his equipment was working properly. The cause of death was confirmed as an arterial gas embolism, leaving the team with many questions about how it happened. As they faced their loss, the team promised to remember Marson, not just for this tragedy, but for his passion for diving. He inspired them to explore the beauty of the ocean, and they would carry his spirit with them on every dive in the future. Our next story takes us to the Source du Doubs, also called the D Spring, in France. Located in the beautiful Jura region, this hidden spot attracts visitors with its amazing natural scenery and interesting rock formations. And among those attracted visitors was a man known as John Masili. He was eager to explore the D Spring with two trusted friends, including John Valentine. Valentine, an experienced diver, bravely went into the cave's depths. He laid down 145 meters, or 476 feet, of line, getting past obstacles that had stopped other divers nearly 20 years before. But this time, something worse was about to happen that would change everything. This karst spring serves as the source of the Doubs River. The area surrounding the spring is rich in history and culture, with many archaeological sites and historical landmarks nearby. The spring itself is relatively small, with a shallow opening that gives rise to the Dew River. The water from the spring is crystal clear, with a distinctive blue color that is characteristic of karst springs. Cave divers love to explore the source de Dew for several reasons. One reason is the thrill of exploring a unique and challenging underwater environment. The source de Dew offers a fascinating opportunity to dive into a karst spring, which is a rare and exciting experience for cave divers. The spring is connected to a network of underwater tunnels and chambers, which offers a thrilling challenge for experienced cave divers. These passages are often narrow and winding, requiring divers to use specialized techniques and equipment to navigate them safely. John Manatee decided to dive into the stunning source de Dew, a choice that reflected his adventurous spirit. Born in 1976, John was a dedicated individual with a strong passion for knowledge and exploration. John began his diving journey with local training, quickly becoming a trusted and skilled diver. Known for his curiosity, he encouraged fellow club members to explore new dive sites and practice safe diving. One of the things that made him an expert cave diver is that he always used to pay close attention to detail and understood the importance of maintaining his equipment. His thorough preparation ensured that he was ready for any situation underwater. On September 28, 2008, John Manatee set out on an exciting journey into the source de Dew, joined by experienced divers John Valentine and Charles Reed Henry. They planned to dive independently, with each diver exploring the cave system alone. This way, they could cover more ground and enjoy the underwater beauty in their own way. Each diver was well trained and prepared, but the unknown depths of the cave always brought surprises. Little did they know that this adventure would lead them to unexpected discoveries and challenges deep within the spring. John Manatee, an experienced diver, made a critical mistake despite warnings from Valentine and Charles. He chose a large rebreather, which might seem like a safe choice, but it was a bad idea for this cave. The narrow passages made it a recipe for disaster. The heavy rebreather could get stuck in tight spaces, trapping John and making it hard to escape. This could lead to serious trouble in the cave's confined areas. But despite these warnings, John decided to proceed, putting himself at risk. They all began to dive in separately. The entrance to the cave was a narrow passage, only 3.5 meters or 11 feet deep, which made it quite tight. Once John was in the water, he quickly realized he was having trouble navigating with his large rebreather. The bulky equipment made it hard to move smoothly through the narrow entrance, and he knew that he had to make a decision. John removed the rebreather to squeeze through the passage. This allowed him to progress deeper into the cave, but he also knew that reattaching it would be a huge challenge. The bulky rebreather and strong current would make it almost nearly impossible to put it back on safely in the tight space. But nevertheless, John decided to continue his dive deeper into the water, reaching a depth of about 1,056 feet, when he suddenly encountered a problem. On the right side, there was a hole covered with rocks and dirt. Next to it, a narrow opening led to an upward passage filled with muddy water, severely limiting visibility. With the murky conditions, John couldn't see what lay ahead, making it difficult for him to move forward. The rocks and the muddy water created a significant obstacle, and he had to be extremely careful to avoid getting stuck. As John swam through the cave, he saw a passage on the left that led to another passage on the other side of the valley. This passage was narrow and tricky. He carefully swam through the passage, keeping an eye on how deep he was and how much air he had left. The passage started under a big hill, but the first 30 meters was blocked because of a previous rockfall. John, nevertheless, didn't give up, and he finally made it to the other side, feeling determined to keep going. After swimming about 555 meters, John reached a big bend in the cave. He kept going through the steep passage, moving around big piles of rocks and gravel that blocked his way. But eventually, he couldn't go any further. John was happy with how far he had come, but he also knew that he was running out of air. It was time to start heading back. John made sure that he had had enough air to make it back safely. On his way back, John went through the same passages that he had come from, facing the same challenges. As he approached the narrow S2 section, his heart raced. Big rocks blocked his way, and he imagined a worst-case scenario. What if I got stuck? What if I ran out of air? John quickly regretted his decision of removing his rebreather at the entrance, and now he couldn't put it back on properly. As he tried to squeeze through a narrow spot, his rebreather got stuck. John quickly decided to leave it behind and use his spare air tank instead. Right after John dropped his rebreather, he tried to swim up, but as he squeezed through another narrow spot, the air tank came loose from the hose which went to his mouth. When this happens, a diver is suddenly left without a source of air, which can be very dangerous, especially if they're still underwater and far from the surface or a safe exit. In John's case, he was still around 1,821 feet down, and in order to reach the surface, he decided to follow a safe ascent rate to avoid decompression sickness. The maximum ascent rate is 30 feet per minute, but the lack of oxygen began to affect him, and John passed out. Valentine and Charles finished their dive and returned to the entrance. After waiting for a while, they began to worry about John because they weren't sure where he was. For a moment, they thought that he may have gone into a deeper part of the cave. As time passed and he still didn't return, their worry grew, and they realized that they had waited too long. Fearing for John's safety, they called for help. Even though it was risky, they ultimately decided to go back into the cave to look for him. Sadly, they found John's body stuck under a ledge in the main part of the cave. The discovery was heartbreaking, and they felt the weight of their loss as they faced the reality of the situation. Florida sees its fair share of diving-related accidents. Ask any experienced local diver, and they'll tell you, more often than not, accidents happen to people without proper certification or who somehow don't prepare for their dive in all the ways they should. But frighteningly, this isn't always the case. Sometimes divers with years of experience and all the proper certifications die sudden and horrific deaths anyway, due to unforeseen circumstances that surprise them during the dive. Today's story is about such a case. We'll follow the tragic death of Zhou Min, a 28-year-old diver who drowned in Manatee Springs State Park in northern Florida. Despite having proper certification and diving alongside an experienced team, Min and her colleagues encountered what could only be described as a nightmare. It all started in November of 2019. Zhou Min, her husband Fu Xiaoyu, friend Chen Jian, and friend Wang Yuan all got on a plane and took what is typically one of the longest flights anywhere in the world, from their home country of China all the way to the U.S. state of Florida on the opposite side of the globe. They chose to embark on this extra long journey because all four shared a passion for cave diving and wanted to explore what some might call the mecca of the sport. Wang Yuan was a world underwater discovery instructor with more than 500 hours of diving experience. Compared to this, Min and the other two had considerably less experience. Min had about 2% of Yuan's experience, with just 11 hours logged at the time of their flight's departure. However, Min was technically certified and had received all the training necessary to legally explore Florida's caves. Not only was the group traveling to Florida in particular, but they also had a specific location they wanted to dive at: Manatee Springs State Park. The park is located in Chiefland, a small city about 130 miles northwest of Orlando. It attracts a wide range of outdoor enthusiasts, from swimmers to hikers to cyclists. But for divers, the boon is in the park's first magnitude spring. The term first magnitude means the spring discharges a particularly high amount of water every day. In the case of Manatee Spring, the daily flow can be as high as 150 million gallons. This is important to the story for reasons that will soon become apparent. On November 24th, Zhou Min, her husband, and two friends entered the park and strapped on their diving gear. Since the flow of Manatee Spring is so strong, divers basically cannot enter it head-on. Instead, there's a sinkhole upstream called Catfish Hotel where divers typically enter the water. From there, they swim upstream and explore much of the spring's internal wonders. Then, they exit from one of several points along the way. What divers do not typically do is turn around and exit back through the Manatee head spring. This involves moving downstream and riding the intense water flow the spring is famous for. Some divers, but not many, have done this successfully in the past, embracing the danger and enjoying the thrill of rocketing out of the opening like a bullet from a gun. One of them was Wang Yuan. Yuan had been to Manatee Springs on several different occasions, and he claimed to have ridden the flow out of the head spring no less than 3 times. This, combined with his generally high level of experience diving, made Yuan confident that he could guide the rest of the group through this rare and thrilling experience. But there was something Yuan didn't know. It had been a few years since Yuan's last visit. In that time, major changes had occurred to the opening of the head spring. Thanks to multiple collapses, the opening at the end of the spring's high-speed water flow was now much smaller, though still just wide enough for a diver to fit through. I'm sure I don't need to explain why a small opening at the end of a 150 million gallon a day water flow is dangerous for people who happen to be inside that water flow, especially if they don't know the opening is small. Ominously, this surprise waited for them at the very end of their exploration. Entering through Catfish Hotel, the 4 enjoyed an extensive and problem-free dive through the caverns and canals of Florida's world-famous underground before making their way toward the exit. At the front of the group, Wang Yuan led the way back out of the spring. He later reported that the flow in the spring was light when he tied off a reel to the main line. In order to reach the head spring, when traveling downstream, the group eventually reached an upward slope. Knowing the spring from past experience, Yuan would have recognized this spot as the beginning of the opening of the cave. He likely expected to encounter a palpable change in water flow upon arriving at this slope. Instead, Yuan was quite literally flung out of the cave. Thanks to the narrower opening, Yuan had unexpectedly been sucked through like a tapioca pearl through a straw. With his mask torn and his rebreather ripped from his mouth, he popped out all alone. He wasn't alone for long. Realizing his fellow divers back inside were in imminent danger of injuring themselves, he turned around and tried to force his way back through the opening. While doing this, he was nearly bowled over by Fu Zhaoyu, the second tapioca pearl in the straw. Now, both Yuan and Zhaoyu tried to claw their way back into Manatee Spring, facing torrential water flow head first. Hauntingly, both could see light signals coming from inside, which meant both their colleagues were calling for their help. Yuan could also see Chen Jian, but the force of the water flow was simply too strong to allow him to get inside and help his friend. Looking further, with difficulty, Yuan recognized that Qian was unconscious and had been wedged in the rocks. Yuan was also able to peer further and spot Zhao Min, who was also unconscious and caught in the rock. However, unlike Qian, Min's regulator was not in her mouth, meaning every second counted in Yuan's attempt to rescue his friends. Summoning all the strength he had, Yuan forced his body through the opening of Manatee Spring. Hanging on to rocks along the walls, Yuan slowly and exhaustingly pulled his way toward the unconscious Chen Jian. He was eventually able to cut Jian loose. Even though Qian was still unconscious, the moment he came loose, his unconscious body went rocketing out of the opening of the spring, crashing into Fu Zhaoyu. Muscles straining, Wang Yuan then tried to force his way even further to reach the unconscious Zhou Min. Yet, despite knowing his friend was surely drowning at that very moment, there are physical limitations that are sometimes simply insurmountable. There was nothing Yuan could do. The current was just too strong. Faced with this, Yuan had no choice but to turn around and try and help Fu Zhaoyu revive the unconscious Chen Jian on the outside of the cave, leaving Fu Zhaoyu's wife inside. Fu Zhaoyu and Wang Yuan were able to revive Chen Jian. Sadly, the deceased body of Zhou Min would not be removed from the cave until the following day. It would take an extensive rescue mission carried out by a team from the International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery Organization. In order to first get to Zhou Min and then dislodge her from the rocks, rescue workers had to make multiple attempts just to get inside the cave. Then, they also had to move rocks, and they even had to remove her diving equipment in order to get her out. According to the National Speleological Society, it is considered normal protocol to check a planned exit before embarking on a traverse dive like this one. Yuan probably felt this wasn't necessary, given that he had done the dive several times before. But he didn't anticipate that the geology of the site could have changed so significantly in just a few years. This, of course, was a disastrous mistake. Even if the opening had been as spacious as the last time he visited, Yuan knew that he and the others were taking a risk. Rocketing out of an underwater cave is never going to be an entirely safe endeavor. And although less likely, such a disaster could have occurred even with the larger opening Yuan was familiar with. Following this horrible disaster that saw a 28-year-old woman killed and her husband and friends traumatized, Manatee Springs State Park decided to remove the main line from Catfish Hotel to Manatee Spring.